Hi, this is Adrian Bellew, and you're watching the Guitar Mania channel. Are you a guitar maniac? I am.
I saw on your Facebook that I couldn't believe it at first because my wife, she's Italian and she's a huge Sanremo fan, and you played at Sanremo the other night.
Yes, I played with a band called Elio, which is one of the most famous sort of interesting bands there. In fact, they do a lot of Zappa music, so they're well loved for that kind of stuff. And just thought it would be interesting to go on the show and maybe do something for David Bowie. So we did Heroes as a little bit of a tribute to him. And we also threw in some Elephant Talk just for good measure.
Excellent.
But you know, it's kind of interesting to play in front of 5 million people with a band that you've never played before. But I think it worked out well.
And you met Carlo Conte, the presenter, who is a very famous presenter, of course, in Italy. And excellent. Now, we've been looking forward to your concert here in Austria for a very long time. So I understand you're playing with the Power Trio again?
Yes, I am. We have kind of a new show. It's very new. In fact, we only played it a little bit in the States before we came here. Of course, the band is Julie Slick, who's been my bass player now for 10 years. Tobias Ralph, the drummer, who's been with us for 5 years. And the show is composed of a lot of material from my solo records, and I think we do 9 King Crimson songs as well. And we do a little bit of what I call Flux with some of the songs, where the song is playing along and all of a sudden gets interrupted by something and then another song happens. So we do that a little bit in the show. There's a little bit of improvisation in a few of the longer pieces. And it's a very powerful band. I love the band. And we're getting really good reactions everywhere we go.
How did you go about putting together the set list? Was there something like feedback from fans or something, or is that something?
No, it was all up to me. I kind of decided, well, it would be good to take a fresh look at this song and that, you know. And I wanted to go back in time a little deeper. We had never played anything from some of the early solo records, so we start the show with some of that stuff. And you know, the King Crimson stuff that I've chosen over the years for the trio is just mainly the stuff that actually will work in the trio format, because a lot of King Crimson material won't work in that format because, for one thing, there's always the double guitar playing that Robert and I did, and without that some of the songs suffer. So you have to be careful which ones you choose. But one of the things I love about the Power Trio and the idea of having 3 people playing in a Power Trio format is it takes the music to a new place. It was not recorded that way in the first place, so it's like a new life for each piece of music or each song. And I love the fact that with the trio, everyone has a lot of musical responsibility, you know, and yet at the same time it's just three people playing together. So it's the least amount of people you can have and still be a band.
Did it take you guys long to prepare for this tour?
No, not for this tour, no, because the preparation was done when we previously had just done a United States tour. We did 40 shows in the United States and Canada, and that's where we worked up the show that we have now. But it's different from whatever we played here last. And of course, the last time we played here, the Power Trio was one half of the band called the Crimson Project. So the last trip through Europe. So it's nice to come over as the Power Trio again.
Can you tell us a bit about your last album, the recording, and how the composing for that went?
Well, Flux, of course, is a music app. The idea I had for more than 20 years of making music where every time it appeared, it was kind of like life itself. It was changed a little bit, get interrupted by something else happens, phone rings, you know. And so it took 5, almost 6 years to just do the content for Flux. For me, to sit down, write, arrange, record, produce that much content. It required hundreds of things. There's more than 50 songs in there, and there's hundreds of bits of pieces of music and full pieces of music and sound effects and visuals and all kinds of things that had to go into this in order to make it truly something that every half an hour you listen to, it's a little different. That's the idea behind it. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking all the content of Flux and putting it out on CD as well. So people who just want to hear the songs as they are without, without the random quality that Flux brings to it.
How do you keep track of all these various parts? I mean, is it all in your head? Do you write it down?
I don't write things down. I'm not a writer, and I don't read music properly as little dots on paper. Even though I was able to play with Frank Zappa that way, I do it all from my mind, yeah. And it's when you got hundreds of tracks, it gets a little confusing every now and then for myself or my engineer who's working on the records with me. We say, what's that called? Well, it used to be called this, and then you change it to that. So I keep a running, paper of everything that's going on. We have something in Flux that's called the content management, which allows me to go in and put in new material or write about the songs or choose what the background colors are or things like that. And I can also rate a song's randomness. So in other words, all songs are not equally the same amount random. So when I put new songs in it, I put a little more randomness in there for those songs, and that means they're going to appear randomly a little more often than the other ones. And then after a while, we even that out. So we just released our first new pack of 30 minutes worth of all new material, and we have a second one ready to go already.
How do you tap into you're such a creative person? How do you tap into this creative energy? Does it come naturally? Do you have something like writer's block, for instance? Does that ever happen to you?
No, I don't think I've ever had writer's block. I kind of wake up every day with something in my head to try, or at least, Flux, the platform that I created, this artistic way of doing things, has really, really opened up every door that I wanted, because now almost anything I like the sound of is usable in Flux. That's really about the only prerequisite. Do I like the sound of it? It can be anything from something I recorded on my iPhone or something I heard at the train station to, the most involved produced piece of material, something I may work on for weeks and weeks. But the idea is that all of it is relevant, and when you hear it in this particular unique sequence, it sounds kind of like what I think life should sound like. So in doing that, it has really helped my ability to be creative, because now so many more things that I think of work. It used to be, for example, with a record, if I had some little interesting loop or something that I liked, maybe there was no place in a song for it, so it got left behind. And now I have places for those things.
Do you for instance, some people fall into old habits in composing, like going back to scales or chords that they always revisit or something? Is that something that you ever encountered?
I have a lot of ways to stop myself from old habits. One way in particular, and what we started from when we first started recording new songs from Flux, is I retuned the guitar a different way.
Okay.
I changed 2 notes on the guitar. And by doing that, when you try to play what you normally play, it doesn't work anymore. So it's a perfect way and utterly free way to stop yourself from having habits. You have to think it over again, and you have to find new chord shapes, and new things happen. And from that, I get very inspired. And generally write a whole string of songs from some new tuning that I like. Another thing that always helps me is the technology itself. If I'm able to get a new sound or a new pedal or a new technique that I've never been able to use before or maybe never heard before, I always find that really inspires me to write material around that.
But isn't there a certain risk that you're not able to recreate that particular sound every time?
Yeah, there's always that risk, but You know, I mean, I have literally hundreds of things now. I can't play them all live anyway. So, so sometimes, you know, you'd have to give up that playability just for the benefit of the piece itself. I try, of course, as often as I can to be able to repeat everything. But there are some accidental things that happen. There are moments when I've just created a sound. I don't even know how I did it, you know, and things that happen like that.
Do you have to revisit sometimes your own compositions and say, how the hell did I play that?
Yeah, how did I do that? Yeah, then I have to relearn them. But you know, that's one of the things I love about, especially about Flux, is you're allowed to have accidents and turn them into things. You're allowed to have, you know, spontaneous moments that you weren't thinking of, as well as all this stuff that's pre-planned and thought about and worked out on piano or guitar, or, you know. So it allows me to have just kind of every possible way to approach creating music.
Adrian, you have played with so many iconic, innovative musicians, and you're one of them. I mean, your guitar playing is incredibly innovative. Did you ever like sit down and think, I have to play different than other guitar players, or it has to sound differently, or I don't want to have this, like, take animal sounds or something? Is that something that you'd like preconceived, or did that just come naturally?
To a certain degree. There was a time in the mid-'70s where I had taught myself to play like a lot of other guitar players, the ones that I really, really loved. And the range of guitar players was very broad. So I learned Segovia pieces, I learned Chet Atkins pieces, Les Paul, of course, you know, the Beatles, you know, of course, Jimi Hendrix and Jeff Beck, and blues players, country players. And I kind of believed that I needed all that as a background to draw from. But there was a time when I realized, well, I just sound like all these different guys, you know, in different styles. And I sort of had to think about that. Well, what am I going to do to sound like myself, you know? And one of the early things I realized I was enjoying was making sounds out of the guitar. So one of the first sounds was making a car horn sound. I figured out how to do that with the volume control and a certain notation on the frets. And another thing was making seagulls with a slide, you know. And so, you know, I was in bands that would play cover songs, and you were expected to pretty much play what was on the record, but I would always slip in some car horn or some seagulls or and people seemed to get a big kick out of that. So that started me down the road of thinking, well, maybe I should just take the guitar and try to make it do other things than everyone else is doing. It was partly intentional, and it was partly just by nature. I'm very curious about sounds, every sound, any sound. I like to analyze it, and that's why over the years I've worked up such a nice vocabulary of being able to sound like different instruments or percussive things or orchestras or animals or whatever. I always find the way to take the sound and, you know, what is the components of it, and is there a way I can do that?
Right.
You know, everyone can do it now with samples, but I like the real creative way of just, you know, actually you're trying to make a whale sound where you figure out, well, how does a whale sound, and what can I do to make that sound?
I mean, you're such a versatile musician. You play the drums, you play the keyboards, and you play the guitar. But what is it that you did? What makes the guitar so special for you?
I think the guitar is the instrument that is more comfortable to me than anything else. First of all, an electric guitar is very, very flexible, very emotive. You can bend the notes. You can get so many different sounds and feels out of it. There's so many different techniques you can use, physical techniques that you don't even require, require an amp or something, you know. So I think it's the most expressive instrument is what I'm trying to say, and it's become, for me, I don't know, it's like another part of my body. I mean, when I put the guitar on, I just feel so completely at home with it. I feel like I can do whatever I want with it. It's like an extension of my voice, you know. your voice is the same thing. It's almost like that. My guitar is almost like a voice, another voice.
Going back to your time when playing with Frank Zappa, was there a particular experience that you took from playing with him and that
many
pushed you forward in your own development?
Of course, yeah. There were musical things with Frank, of course, because he had such incredible music, and it was so complex for me, an untrained musician who taught himself to try to figure out how to work. You know, I didn't get the sheets of paper to learn it. I had to figure it out another way. And he was, for example, the first person that showed me how to play in odd time signatures, which, because I had some drumming background, and I've been a drummer all my life, I took to it like a duck in water. You know, all of a sudden, oh, I understand this. It's just a way of accenting things, you know, and I got it really quickly. But no one had showed me that, and I'd never figured it out on my own because up to that point I was always playing songs that were on the radio. There was no need for knowledge of time signatures and things. So he did propel me into a more complex world of music. The other thing that I think I got a lot of from Frank was the sort of how to be an actual professional recording artist, an international touring artist, how to run your own business, what to do in a studio, you know, a lot of very, very important things that don't show up anywhere else, you know. Just watching him every day and learning from him and listening to what he had to say about all these different subjects was so valuable to me. Because when I came to Frank, I was just a musician who had done nothing but play in small clubs and, you know, barely eke out a living. So I didn't know anything. You know, when I went to audition with Frank, it was the first time I was ever on an airplane. That's how green and stupid I was. So
How cool.
I needed instruction, and I really got a lot of that in 1 year from him. And what happened next is that was the springboard into working with people like David Bowie and Talking Heads. And in those instances, those artists just simply wanted me to play as wild as I wanted and have...
exactly. And David Bowie, I understand, gave you a lot of freedom to play whatever you wanted.
So. That's all he wanted. Just do whatever you want. Go as wild as you want. Well, that gave me a lot of impetus, of course, and encouragement to try to take my guitar playing further, and it all just grew together at that. And then I think the next stage was when I actually joined King Crimson, because all this time I was thinking someday I would like to be doing my own material, and that was the goal, make your own records. And when I joined King Crimson, that's the first opportunity I had to do that, where I was suddenly now the lyricist, the songwriter, the singer, the front man, and guitar partner to Robert Fripp. So that really is where everything changed for me, because I went from being a side man to being in the position that I always wanted to be in. And at the same time, I started making my solo records too. So it was a double dose of being able to finally be in the creative chair where you get to do what you want. But very happy circumstances all the way for me.
If you were to give one piece of advice to people who want to become professional musicians and have just started, what would that be?
Well, you know, there's a lot of people trying to be in the music business, and I'm not sure that all of them really should be there. So I would say really think about how passionate you are. I believe that to be really, really good, you have to be so passionate that it's all you want to do. When I was a teenage boy coming home from school, I went right straight to my basement at my parents' house and started playing drums. And then when I taught myself to play guitar, I just couldn't start playing guitar. If you don't have that kind of passion about it, maybe it's not the thing you should be doing, because the only way that you'll really get good enough to express yourself and actually have your own personality come out in the music is to work really hard at it. It's not easy to master an instrument. You can, of course, do other things in the world of music. You don't have to master an instrument. You could play, you could play in a nightclub, or you could play on commercials, or there's so many different ways to utilize music. But if you're serious about wanting to be a recording artist and a touring musician, then I think you're going to really need to make that everything you want. That's got to be number one.
What can we expect from ADRIAN BELEW in the? What are your plans? Now we have Flux on CD.
Well, Flux is going to continue. It's never finished, so that keeps me pretty busy right there. I do plan to keep touring with my trio, or with Crimson Project, if that happens again, or both. I'm starting to get into film composition. I have something that's going to happen pretty soon, but I can't tell you about it because they won't allow me. And that will be another new area. But I think I'm happily at this area now where I just get to do the music that comes in my mind. It's a very rare treat to be able to do that and earn enough of a living doing that it's okay. So I'm just going to enjoy that as long as I can. I'm going to just be as creative as I can be and just keep going. I have no desire to ever stop.
Excellent. Well, on that note, Adrian, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Looking forward to tonight's show.
Yeah, me too. We've had some great audiences, great shows, really good turnouts, and that was the main thing I was concerned about coming to Europe, because, just with the economy and everything that happens in the world, you never know how it's going to work out. And I'm so happy that we have really had such great support from the fans that it means we'll be back.
As Arnold Schwarzenegger used to say,
We'll be back.
I will be back.